My name is Ryan Mitchell. I'm a 24-year-old waiter, and this is the story of how that single public humiliation led to the most unexpected second chance of my life. It all began on an ordinary Tuesday, in the middle of the breakfast rush at Maplewood Diner. The air was thick with the familiar symphony of sounds, the sizzle of bacon on the flat top, the glug of coffee pouring into thick ceramic mugs, the clatter of silverware on formica, the low murmur of gossip, and the constant rhythmic squeak of my own worn-out shoes against the tiled floor. It was a rhythm I knew by heart, a chaotic melody that, for nearly 3 years, had kept me grounded in the midst of long days and longer nights. But that rhythm shattered in an instant, broken by the harsh sting of a single amplified voice. Mr. Harlan's words landed like a hammer, loud enough to silence every conversation in the room. "You know he can't pay, and yet you serve him anyway. Do you want your wages docked, Ryan?" A wave of profound, suffocating silence washed over the diner. It was the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own breathing, of the frantic thumping of your own heart. Harlan, a man whose waistline had expanded in direct proportion to his ego, stood with his hands on his hips, his face a blotchy canvas of indignation. His thick, accusing finger jabbed toward my chest before swinging dramatically to the corner booth, a spotlight of shame. There sat a small boy, shrinking into an oversized yellow windbreaker. The jacket looked like it had been passed down twice, its bright color a stark contrast to the boy's attempt to be invisible. It swallowed his slight frame whole, the sleeves rolled up in thick cuffs. His backpack, a faded blue canvas with frayed straps, was clutched tight against his stomach, less a school bag and more a shield against the world. In that frozen, terrible moment, 30 pairs of eyes shifted between me, my boss, and the child. Construction workers from the site down the street froze with forks heavy with scrambled eggs midair. 2 elderly couples, the Swansons and the Millers who came in every Tuesday and Thursday, held their mugs of coffee halfway to their lips. Even Caleb, the line cook, a man of few words and even fewer glances up from his grill, stood frozen in the service window, his spatula dripping grease, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and pity. The boy's shoulders folded inward, his spine curling until his whole body looked like a question mark made of shame. His gaze was fixed on the untouched egg sandwich I had just placed in front of him, as though looking anywhere else might cause him to completely disappear. The humiliation radiating from him was a palpable force, so heavy I swear I could feel it pressing against my own chest, making it hard to breathe. At that moment, I knew what everyone else in that diner saw. A foolish, soft-hearted waiter breaking the rules for a charity case. But what they didn't see, what they couldn't possibly see, was the quiet dignity of this kid, who showed up every morning with a small, sweaty handful of carefully counted coins, never quite enough, but always offered with a solemn hope. They didn't see the way his eyes darted toward the door between every tentative bite, as if he were waiting for some unseen trouble to walk right through and claim him. For nearly 3 years, I'd arrived at Maplewood Diner at 5 in the morning to grind the coffee, prep the stations, and brace for the rush. The work was grueling, the hours unforgiving, and the pay barely enough to scrape by. But it gave me just enough to survive. The regulars made it easier. The construction crew who laughed loud enough to shake the windows and always ordered the lumberjack special. The third-grade teachers from the nearby elementary school who swapped grading horror stories over endless coffee refills. The retirees who split a single stack of pancakes and tipped me with a kindness as valuable as cash. They remembered my birthday with a collectively signed card. They asked about my night classes in business administration. Some even joked, "Don't forget us little people when you're a big-shot CEO, Ryan." Their warmth, their small affirmations of my existence beyond the apron, made the low pay and long shifts almost worth it. What most of them didn't know, however, was that behind my tired smile was a mountain of responsibility. Rent for my shoebox studio apartment was due in a week, and I was already $40 short. My student loan payments, a monument to a degree I hadn't even finished yet, piled high on the corner of my desk, their bold-faced past due, notices a constant source of low-grade anxiety. I was 24, still hustling through night classes at the community college, still clinging to a frayed thread of hope for something better, but never daring to expect it. The diner wasn't glamorous, but it was a predictable, tangible stability, and I couldn't afford to lose it. 2 weeks before the confrontation, I noticed the boy for the first time. He slipped in at exactly 7 o'clock every morning, moving with a quiet stealth that seemed unnatural for a child. Always in that same yellow windbreaker, always alone. He would slide into the booth farthest from the door, the one half hidden in the shadows of a wilting fern, as though he wanted to erase himself from the room. The first time I approached his table, he whispered, "Egg sandwich, please." His voice so faint I had to lean down to hear it, the words barely disturbing the air between us. When the food came, he meticulously laid out his payment on the table. A few wrinkled dollar bills and a small pile of coins. He was always short by nearly $2. The first time, I hesitated for only a second before I scooped up the money and said, "You're all set." I covered the rest from my own tips, a small act that felt both necessary and reckless. I started bringing him a glass of milk with his sandwich. Growing boys need calcium, I'd say with a gentle smile. He never smiled back, never responded, never even looked me directly in the eye. But he drank every drop of the milk and ate every last bite of the sandwich, his eyes always flicking towards the door, as though he expected a shadow to fall over him at any moment. For 2 weeks it was our silent contract of need and provision. 7 sharp, egg sandwich, coins on the table, my quiet help, until that Tuesday morning, when Mr. Harlan decided to make me an example. "I asked you a question, Ryan?" Harlan barked, his voice slicing through the thick silence like a knife. The words hung in the air, heavy and humiliating. I saw, from the corner of my eye, Denise, a server who thrived on drama, pull out her phone with a smirk. I knew what was coming. The video would be in the staff group chat before I'd even clocked out. My humiliation, immortalized in pixels for a few cheap laughs. My own anger, hot and sharp, rose in my throat, but I forced it down. "He pays what he can, sir," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "And I can't let a child go to school hungry." "That is not your problem," Harlan snapped, his words echoing in the cavernous quiet. "This is a business, not a soup kitchen. No more freebies or it comes out of your paycheck. Understood?" The boy couldn't take it anymore. He abandoned his half-eaten sandwich, scrambled to grab his backpack, and bolted. The jingle of the bell on the door was violently loud in the silent room. Before I could say a word, he was gone. Just a flash of yellow running down the street, disappearing around the corner. I walked over to clear the booth, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. Under the glass of milk, I found a small, neatly folded piece of paper. My fingers closed around it just as Harlan barked from across the room. "In my office." Now, the tiny office smelled of old cigarettes, stale coffee, and bargain bin cologne. A single, harsh fluorescent bulb flickered erratically overhead, casting long, dancing shadows that made the cramped space feel even smaller. On the cluttered desk, a formal warning slip sat ready and waiting, my name already written at the top. "Sign here," Harlan said flatly, not even glancing up from a stack of invoices he was pretending to read. "Your first and only warning regarding unauthorized discounts. Sir, he's just a kid trying to get by. Not problem." His eyes finally lifted, sharp and cold as chips of ice. "Parents should feed their own kids. It's not your job to be a hero. Sign it." My hand trembled as I picked up the pen. A dozen arguments swirled in my head. I could have told him about the boy's carefully counted coins, his worn-out jacket, the profound loneliness in his eyes. I could have told him about the note that was burning a hole in my pocket. Instead, I thought of my rent, my loans, my precarious stability. I signed my name. "Don't make me regret keeping you," Harlan muttered as I turned to leave. "Plenty of people want your job." Walking back into the diner was like walking onto a stage after forgetting all my lines. The low murmur of conversation had returned, but it was strained. I felt the weight of everyone's eyes on me. Some pitying, some judgmental. Denise shot me a triumphant glare. Mrs. Swanson gave me a small, sad smile. As I passed the construction crew's table, one of them, a big man named Frank, quietly slipped a $10 bill into my apron pocket. "For the kid," he grunted, not looking at me. That night, I lay awake in my studio, staring at the cracked ceiling, the hum of the ancient radiator filling the silence. The weight of rent, loans, and survival pressed down on me, a physical ache in my bones. I couldn't afford to lose this job, but I couldn't forget the boy's hunched shoulders, the way shame had poured off him like rain. Turning him away wasn't just cruel. It felt like a betrayal of some fundamental part of myself I hadn't realized I still valued. By morning, huddled over a cup of instant coffee, I had made a decision. I took the $10 Frank had given me and added 10 of my own. From now on, I would pay for the boy's meal in full before he even ordered. I'd ring it up myself and keep the receipt. He would be a paying customer, and Harlan couldn't say a single word. But 7 o'clock came and went with no sign of the yellow jacket. Then 7:15. By 7:30, I was checking the door every other minute, a cold knot of worry tightening in my stomach. Had Harlan's outburst scared him away for good? Was he sick? Or worse, the scenarios playing out in my mind were growing darker with each passing minute. At 8:15, everything changed. A gleaming black SUV with tinted windows, the kind you only see in movies, pulled up and parked directly in front of the diner. 2 men in crisp dark suits stepped out, their movements economical and purposeful. They scanned the area before one opened the rear door. A tall, impeccably dressed man emerged, his tailored black suit worth more than 3 months of my wages. His presence alone seemed to change the air pressure in the street. He was followed by the 2 men as he walked inside. The diner fell into a silence so deep and sudden that I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator behind the counter. Harlan hurried forward, plastering on a smile so fake it looked painful. He smoothed his stained tie, a gesture of pathetic deference. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to Maplewood Diner. A table for 3? His voice was suddenly syrupy, a tone I'd never heard him use before. The man didn't respond. His eyes, sharp and intensely searching, swept the diner, taking in every detail before they landed on me. Finally, he spoke, his voice deep, controlled, and carrying an undeniable weight that commanded attention. "I'm not here to eat. I'm looking for the person who has been helping my son." My blood ran cold. The 4 suited men, 2 inside, 2 still by the car, fanned out slightly, their stances protective but utterly professional. Harlan blinked, his fake smile faltering. "I'm not sure I understand, sir. My security team did some looking into my son's recent activities," the man explained, his gaze unwavering on me. "They told me my son, Ethan, has been coming here for breakfast. He's 10 years old, wears a yellow windbreaker. I'm looking for the waiter who's been serving him." My hand, holding a coffee pot, began to shake. I set it down carefully on the counter and stepped forward. "That's me," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "My name is Ryan. I've been serving him." The man studied me for a long, agonizing moment. His face was stern, etched with lines of worry, but as he looked at me, something in his expression softened almost imperceptibly. "He hasn't eaten breakfast outside our house since his mother died 3 years ago," the man said, his voice dropping slightly. "You're the first person he's spoken more than a few words to in all that time." The diner was so quiet you could have heard a napkin drop. Caleb was motionless in the kitchen window. I swallowed hard. "I didn't know," I managed to say. The man extended a hand. "My name is Daniel Cooper." A ripple of audible gasps spread across the diner. Even I, who paid little attention to the news, knew the name. Daniel Cooper, the reclusive tech investor, the billionaire philanthropist whose face had graced the covers of business magazines, known as much for his immense wealth as for the tragic loss of his wife in a car accident. "My son's name is Ethan," he continued, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "After my wife's accident, he developed selective mutism, a trauma response. We've tried the best therapists, the most renowned specialists. Everything money could buy. Nothing worked. He just retreated. And then yesterday he came home and handed his tutor this." From the inner pocket of his suit jacket, Daniel Cooper pulled out a familiar folded piece of paper. My chest tightened. I knew it immediately, the note I'd found under the milk glass. In uneven, childish handwriting, it read, "You're the only one who talks to me like I'm normal. I like the milk. Thank you. E." "This is the first time he's reached out to anyone on his own in 3 years," Daniel said, his voice cracking slightly on the last word. "The first time he's written anything other than a school assignment. I had to find out who you were." Harlan, sensing a catastrophic misstep, jumped in, his words slick with desperation. "Mr. Cooper, I assure you our establishment welcomes your son with open arms. In fact, I personally instructed Ryan to take special care of him. On the house, of course." Daniel's eyes turned icy. "Interesting. My head of security was here an hour ago, speaking with your staff. And the story they overheard from your very candid employees doesn't quite match yours." Harlan paled, his face crumpling. Behind him, Denise quickly slid her phone back into her apron, suddenly fascinated by a spot on the floor. "Where is Ethan today?" I asked, my worry for the boy overtaking everything else. "At home with a cold," Daniel replied, his gaze softening again as it returned to me. "But he was more upset about missing his breakfast here." He turned back to Harlan, his voice laced with contempt. "I don't want your apologies." Then he looked at me. "What I need are people like him." From his pocket, he pulled a sleek, heavy business card and handed it to me. "Ryan Mitchell, if you've ever considered running your own place, I would like to finance it." I stared at the card, the embossed letters spelling Cooper Investments blurring in my vision. I don't understand." "You showed kindness to my son when he felt invisible," Daniel said simply. "You treated him with dignity when you had nothing to gain. I want to return that kindness." At that exact moment, the bell on the door chimed softly. Ethan walked in, the yellow jacket zipped up to his chin, followed by an older woman who must have been his caretaker. He saw his father, then his eyes found me. For the very first time, his big, brown eyes locked directly onto mine, clear and unafraid. "Will you still have egg sandwiches?" he asked, his voice small but clear as a bell in the silent diner. Tears I hadn't realized were there began to sting my eyes. I knelt down to his level. "Every single day if you want them." And for the first time since I'd met him, Ethan smiled. 3 months later, Ethan and I stood side by side at the grand opening of E and Her Mornings, a cozy cafe 6 blocks from the old diner. The name, his idea, stood for Ethan and Ryan. Warm lighting filled the space, comfortable booths lined the walls, and a small, bright corner was set aside with books and games just for school kids. A beautifully lettered sign hung on the main wall. "No child goes hungry. Every student welcome." We kept prices affordable and, with Daniel's backing, introduced a suspended meal program where customers could prepay for a meal for someone in need. Ethan came every morning before school, his bright yellow windbreaker now replaced by a tiny apron with the cafe's logo stitched on the front. He helped arrange napkins, carried menus to tables with a new, confident stride, and carefully wrote the daily specials on the chalkboard. Each week, his handwriting grew steadier. Sometimes Daniel joined him, sitting quietly in a corner booth with his laptop, always leaving a $100 tip in the jar. Other times, a car would pick Ethan up after his shift, and later I'd find a handwritten note from Daniel tucked under the counter, saying simply, "Thank you for giving me my son back." Harlan emailed me once, a desperate, rambling message offering me my old job back with a substantial raise. I deleted it without responding. Many of the old Maplewood regulars had already migrated over to E and Our Mornings. Caleb, the line cook, had joined me too, his quiet loyalty a bedrock. He brought with him his legendary hash browns and decades of kitchen wisdom, presiding over our new, state-of-the-art grill with a quiet satisfaction. When the local news picked up the story, reporters kept asking me to describe Daniel Cooper's incredible generosity. I kept my answer simple. I didn't do anything special. I just refused to ignore a hungry kid. One quiet morning, a few months after we opened, Ethan walked in with a carefully wrapped, flat package. Inside were two framed photos. The first was a candid shot of him, smiling shyly while holding an egg sandwich at one of our tables. Beneath it, in his own handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for the milk when I was thirsty and the kindness when I was hungry." The second was a photo of a beautiful woman with a gentle, loving smile, his mother. Ethan told me he wanted her photo to hang here too, so she could be part of the mornings with us. I hung both frames behind the counter, where they still hang today, a constant reminder of how it all began. Last week, I was wiping down the front window and saw Harlan across the street, staring at the morning rush pouring into our cafe. For a moment, our eyes met through the glass. He looked tired and diminished. He turned and walked away. I didn't feel a shred of triumph, just a profound sense of gratitude. His attempt to humiliate me had inadvertently unlocked this second chance, this life filled with purpose. That same morning, Ethan, now chattering away about his science fair project, tugged on my apron. He pointed toward a young boy who had just walked in. He looked about 12, his shoes worn thin, his expression guarded and weary. Without a word, Ethan went to the kitchen window, got an egg sandwich and a glass of milk from Caleb, and carried it to the boy's table. The boy's eyes widened in stunned surprise. Ethan didn't say anything. He just gave a small, understanding nod before returning to my side behind the counter. And in that moment, watching Ethan pass on the same simple kindness that had been shown to him, I realized the full truth of it all. When the world tries to shame you for your compassion, you have two choices. You can retreat into bitterness, or you can double down on kindness. Ethan, in his quiet, resilient way, had shown me which path to take. A path that started with a simple egg sandwich and gave me back a purpose I didn't even know I was searching for.